Hello, my name is Liz Hiller with NACE. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The State of the Gen Z Job Search, New Insights to Inform Your Fall Strategy. It is my pleasure to introduce Kate Beckman, Director of Community and Insights. Take it away, Kate.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. Really excited to talk about today's topic, especially going to the fall recruitment season, all around the state of the Gen Z job search. As we're all signing on, I would love actually if everyone would just say hello in the chat, say where you're calling in from. I really think these webinars are more valuable when there's an interactive component. And personally, if you are, interested in any of these insights, if you have any context you want to share about your own strategies, I definitely encourage you to leverage the chat functionality throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, leverage that Q&A box and I'll be looking at that throughout. But yeah, would love to just say hello to everyone in the chat, hear where you're calling in from. I'm calling in actually today from Brooklyn, New York. So if there's any other East Coasters, New Yorkers, would be happy to hear where you're calling in from, but would also love to know just where in the country everyone is. So Wisconsin, I'm actually from Wisconsin originally, so it's kind of fun to see some folks from that Midwest representation. So awesome. Well, we have a really data-packed planned webinar today, so I'll just go ahead and dive right in. But again, just keep introducing yourself. And if you have any of your own insights that you want to share or just comments about today's data, definitely feel free to leverage that chat box. And I'll be looking at that throughout, but just being able to interact with your fellow attendees. So again, welcome to the state of the Gen Z job search. I'm so excited to walk you through some brand new data that we've collected at RippleMatch. To introduce myself again, my name is Kate Beckman. I'm the Director of Community Insights here at RippleMatch. So I'm responsible for conducting all of our data on Gen Z recruitment trends and also hosting our community events for the talent acquisition community, really centered on education and collaboration. So really excited to meet some new folks today. And if you are interested, I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. It's always great to stay in touch after these events, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions about today's data, but feel free to search me on LinkedIn and send me a request so we can stay connected. In terms of what RippleMatch is, what we do, how do we get this data? So RippleMatch, we're the next-gen technology solution focused on optimizing your campus recruitment strategies and helping you connect with Gen Z. So what our technology does is removes all the time-intensive parts from your recruitment strategy, and it also removes the time-intensive parts from Gen Z job seekers. So our technology automates things such as sourcing, it automates inbound applicant review, it helps you with events management and managing your community. So our technology is really designed to just make those time-intensive processes much more efficient, so you can actually focus on building those authentic connections and relationships with candidates. In terms of what we're going to be talking about today, so this is really around the state of the Gen Z job search, and this is brand new research that we have collected, and there's really 4 areas that we're going to be going over today. So Gen Z confidence, we've been collecting data on how Gen Z candidates are really faring in their job search, their confidence, since the economic slowdown has occurred. We'll also be talking about career discovery, so how Gen Z candidates are actually discovering new opportunities, what that balance looks like. Hiring expectations. So what do candidates today actually expect in terms of their job search from employers? And then reneges. So the state of reneges, how are candidates actually, going into the job search? What are their expectations for if they'll rescind an offer? So we'll be focusing on all of these with data points. And this is all really relevant going into the fall, just given that these data points can inform your strategy. In terms of the data report that we're going to be talking about today, so we surveyed around 1,500 candidates, and as you can see here, the gender breakdown is around 50-50. We do have a little bit more concentrated in STEM, and academic years are ranging from grad school all the way to freshman. So we have a pretty representative sample here. And again, we'll be walking through this today. So let's, before we get started, I do want to say that this report is available to download here. So you can go ahead and scan this QR code. This report is pretty big, so I definitely recommend taking your time reading through this, but I'll be walking through the highlights today in this presentation. But you can go ahead and scan this QR code to actually access the report and download it. So I'll give everyone just a second to download this QR code and scan this here so you can get the report. That'll take you to a landing page to download. Awesome. Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive into the topic itself. So let's start off with the state of Gen Z confidence. So we have some data points that we've collected here just about Gen Z candidates and how they're feeling going into this year. So as you can see here, we have been collecting this data point for the past year. And as you can see, candidate job confidence is still remaining pretty shaky heading into fall recruitment. So we've asked this question, how confident, please select if you are confident or not confident about your job search. And as you can see in fall 2022, only 15% of candidates actually said they are not confident in their ability to secure a good internship or job. That number jumped up majorly into January 2023. So 51% said that they are not confident. And we saw that really hit its peak in May 2023. Not surprisingly, candidates that were still searching for jobs still hadn't found that internship, weren't confident they would find one. But heading into the fall, we are seeing that around 50% of candidates are not feeling great about their ability to secure a good internship or job. So that's around half of candidates that are just looking at the current environment and they're not entirely sure, how they're going to secure that job, how they're going to secure that internship. In terms of what their challenges they expect to be, so what's actually contributing to this lack of confidence, we're seeing that having applications stand out and being ghosted is Gen Z's top anticipated job search challenge. So we asked, what do you expect that biggest challenge to be? And as you can see, 60% of candidates say that having their application stand out and progress to the interview stage is their biggest challenge. This is followed by being ghosted by recruiters, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in the slide deck, and knowing which companies are hiring early career candidates in this economy. Still close to that 50% mark, are not sure which companies are hiring early career candidates. What we also see is that Gen Z candidates actually expect to submit more than 100 applications this fall. So we're seeing that if you see this number combined of, 200 plus or 100 to 200 applications, it's more than 50% are really expecting that they're going to submit hundreds of applications this fall. So this is really a combination of, again, that shaky confidence. So not sure if they're going to land that job, but also, technology does make it so easy to just kind of go down the list and hit that easy apply button. So as you can see here, definitely a lot of applications heading into the fall. Some takeaways from this section, since I know I just threw a lot of numbers at you. So just to kind of recap, we're seeing 50% of Gen Z candidates are not confident in their ability to land a good job or internship this year. 60% of candidates are concerned with having their application stand out to recruiters, and 57% of candidates plan to submit 100 or more applications this year. So the kind of thing to take away from this is we're still seeing candidates lacking in that confidence to actually land a good job or internship. We're still seeing candidates just concerned that their applications will stand out to recruiters. And we're seeing there's going to be a lot of applications submitted this fall. So something to keep in mind as you're kind of wondering, what should you be prioritizing? It's definitely preparing for that influx of applications and also how to support Gen Z candidates in another season of kind of shaky confidence. And I do want to take a moment to just remind you that if you have any questions about each of these sections or throughout the presentation today, I encourage you to submit those in the Q&A chat box. I'll try to keep an eye on that throughout today's presentation. That way, if I can answer anything as we go through each section, I'm happy to kind of address that as we go. Otherwise, I'll save those questions closer to the end of today's presentation. But again, feel free to leverage that chat box or that Q&A box, and I'm happy to engage and answer some questions about this data. All right, let's see, moving on to our next section. So the state of career discovery. So this is all about how are Gen Z candidates actually discovering opportunities? How are they interacting with their job search in today's landscape? As you can see here, the Gen Z career paths are influenced by personal experiences and job search technology. So we ask students when deciding which roles to apply for, which of the following influences your career path. And as you can see, the top selection here is previous internships or work experience. So 53% selected that, but kind of also taking that top spot is roles recommended to me by a job search platform at 51%, and classes taken in school or academic major. So we're really seeing the top three here is a split between, traditional discovery methods such as, work experience, college and university involvement, and then roles recommended by that job search platform, so by technology. And so what really this says is that today's candidates are really approaching their job search through hybrid methods, so those traditional methods and technology. I do want to point out that we aren't seeing as much influence from advice from family or advice from friends, or even things such as careers that show up on social media, or pop culture such as movies and TV shows. So it really boils down to things such as previous internships, academic major, and job search platform. And then one quick question: how did you source the student participates in this survey? We did survey our candidate base, and our candidate base is over 1 million candidates across the country. So it's a pretty representative model of students across the country that are definitely leveraging a variety of methods to search for their job, which we'll actually showcase on the next slide as well. But that's how we source the students in that survey. So just gonna mark that question as done, but definitely appreciate all the questions as we go. So please continue submitting those. In terms of how candidates are actually applying for jobs and internships, so moving a bit beyond career discovery and focusing more on actually applying. As you can see, LinkedIn is very popular among today's candidates. And as you might recall, candidates are submitting, 100, 200 applications, and LinkedIn has that very easy way to apply, that have that easy apply button. So candidates are definitely leveraging and taking advantage of that easy technology. 70% of candidates say that LinkedIn is a primary method of leveraging, searching for jobs. Attending career fairs is also another way that candidates are planning to really find and apply for those jobs and internships. We also see a lot of reliance on things like RippleMatch, Indeed, Handshake, Google Jobs. We don't see a huge reliance on, networking with friends and family, similar to that previous question. Around a third are going to go directly to the career pages of companies. Some are going to attend conferences, but this is a kind of a representative sample of just how candidates are leveraging both those online and in-person methods. So again, that theme of hybrid search and that hybrid job search. Moving on to events. So I know this question of recruitment events is always on our minds going into the fall season. So we did ask candidates, what are you planning this fall? Are you planning to go to in-person events? Are you planning virtual? Are you not planning to go to recruitment events at all? And what we're seeing is that we see that around 41% of candidates say that they plan to attend more in-person than virtual events this fall. 28% say they'll plan to attend more virtual than in-person. 23% equal amount of virtual and in-person. So, we're definitely seeing the majority of candidates do plan to attend recruitment events. Only 8% say they don't plan to attend any recruitment events. So if you're wondering, how can I best connect with candidates? It definitely is creating that hybrid strategy of both virtual and in-person events. We also ask candidates, why do you plan on attending more of one type of event or the other? So for those that selected, why do you plan on attending more in-person events than virtual? We see that 72% say in-person events feel more effective for making connections or networking, and 47% of in-person events say they would increase their chances of landing a role. Only 15% of candidates say that in-person events are easier to make time for. But as you can see on the next page, when it comes to convenience, virtual events are really the ease, designed for that ease of candidates attending. So 51% said that it's easier to attend more virtual events and more convenient for their schedule. We saw about a third say most employers don't visit their school. So that's definitely helpful to keep in mind, that if you're only doing in-person events, you might be missing out on that 30% of candidates that say employers aren't visiting their schools. So just helpful to keep in mind there. We also asked, since we know that attendance rates can be a bit of a variable, it can kind of seem kind of confusing if you're hosting an event, you have a ton of RSVPs, and then only 25%, 30% of candidates actually show up. So we asked, why might you RSVP for an event but not end up attending? And what we see is that sometimes day of a higher priority event comes up, and this definitely is probably the case for virtual events. Around 53% of candidates selected that higher priority day of. And then 38% actually say that they RSVP'd with interest, but weren't sure if they would really attend. So what we're seeing here is that there's a share of candidates that they might see your event, they might be bookmarking it for later and might decide to attend, later on, or if they get more interesting kind of context about the event. But just because they RSVP, it doesn't mean that they actually have the intention of going. And you might still need to do that work to actually convince them that your event is worthwhile. We see around 23% say they didn't receive sufficient follow-up, and only 10% said that they forgot about the commitment. So when you're kind of considering how you might want to most effectively communicate with candidates ahead of the event, sending those reminders that aren't necessarily fleshed out with more details than the original event had, or just saying a quick, hey, I wanted to make sure you were still attending, it might not actually be tackling that problem of, the low show rate that you could be expecting, but really sending more information about why this is a worthwhile event, what are candidates going to get out of it, is something that might increase your attendance rate and actually, help drive more candidates to the event. So based on this data, that's the approach that I would take. Some key takeaways here, 51% of candidates are discovering career paths through an algorithm or technology recommendation. So again, you saw 53% of candidates say that they are discovering career paths through their academic majors or their work experience, but a very large share of them are also saying they're discovering that through technology. So technology and these recommendations are really the future in a lot of ways. But as we know, there are a lot of technology platforms out there that aren't necessarily showcasing intelligent recommendations. They're just kind of based on keywords or filters. And as a result, there might be a lot of applications out there that are kind of just going down the list, hitting that easy apply button and not necessarily relevant for the job, which definitely contributes to that kind of state of over apply in this mass apply era. We're also seeing that candidates do prefer in-person recruitment events over virtual, but there's still definitely a large share of candidates that will be attending virtual events. And especially when it comes to convenience, being able to make time in their schedule, virtual events are still going to be able to, achieve that better than in-person events. And then finally, when it comes to actually making sure candidates show up after they RSVP, there's definitely a faction of candidates that are just not committed, even if they RSVP to an event. So the work to market your event doesn't stop when you send out that initial email and get that RSVP. The work continues with those follow-ups, that continuation of, hey, new speaker just announced, or this is what you can expect from the agenda, or this is what will happen afterwards if you attend the event. It's very important to kind of convince that set of candidates that maybe just had a little bit of interest but weren't convinced yet that they want to take the time to attend that event. And next, we're going to talk about the state of hiring expectations. But again, if you have any questions, I definitely encourage you to put those in the Q&A. So the state of hiring expectations, this is focused all around how fast do candidates expect you to get back to them during their job search? What are their expectations for that candidate experience? So let's walk through this. So we ask candidates when applying to jobs or internships, which of the following options contributes to a negative experience? And this has remained pretty consistent over the course of time. But what we're seeing is that ghosting is really the number one factor that leads to a negative candidate experience during applications for Gen Z candidates. So top result here is not hearing back at all from a company if you are no longer advancing. So 74% say that's the number one thing that they just don't like in the candidate experience. And in the question, we put in parentheses ghosting, so they identified that as ghosting as well. The second, top selected result is hearing about application status very slowly to move forward. So 60% selected that. We also see things like long applications, so uploading resume, filling out additional information contributes to a negative experience, but we're not seeing too much, negative connotations if there's no compensation, if it's an unclear job description, or, unclear if that role is remote, hybrid, or in person. We're really seeing that the biggest kind of detractor from a candidate experience is just not being kept in the loop. And I have a question here. Do we know how they define long? And yes, we actually are going to be going over that in the next slide. So definitely a good question. So we had that same question as, what is the expectations of Gen Z in terms of what is reasonable to them? What do they consider a slow application response? And what we're seeing here is actually, very, very timely question. Majority of candidates expect an application response within 1 week, actually, and industry averages put that closer to 17 to 21 days. And after submitting application, how fast do you think a company should get back to you? And we also put in parentheses, in other words, what do you consider a timely application response? And what we're seeing here is that the majority say 5 to 7 business days. But when you add up this 36, 19, and 9, you do see that the majority of candidates expect a response to their application within 1 week. And what we've seen from this is that candidates, they're not necessarily expecting, a 1 day response or 2 days or less, but we are saying that they would feel frustrated if they don't get any kind of response at all. They're not necessarily expecting a yes, you're going to move forward, or no, yes, you're going to move forward, or like, here are the next steps. But they do want to know just what is the status. If they submit an application, they want to get that confirmation of, yes, there's steps coming, and just kind of keep checking on your email, but they don't want to hear nothing at all. We also are seeing that when it comes to this application time, that Gen Z candidates begin to lose interest in a role within 2 weeks of applying. So we asked this question: if you don't hear back from a company after submitting an application, after how many days do you begin to lose interest in the role, even if that company were to eventually respond? And as you can see, you've got a little bit of time. It's not like candidates are necessarily saying after, that 5 to 7 business days that they would like to hear back. The majority aren't necessarily just losing interest. They just would like to hear back within 5 to 7 days. But we do see that, among that 8 to 14 days, so within 2 weeks, they're going to start losing interest. And if you do get back to them kind of after that 2 week mark, the likelihood of them continuing to be excited in the process, really engaged, is definitely starting to decrease. And we're saying that they would definitely prefer to be, hear back in that 5 to 14 day spot. And there's one question: are they wanting a direct response from a real person or automated? And we did ask one question that we didn't end up including in our report, which was, how would you feel if a company never got back to you? And they had two options. Frustrated, I would prefer a response even if it was an impersonal one, and understanding, I understand companies get a lot of applications and can't respond to everyone. And the final percentage there ended up being around 72% said frustrated, I would prefer a response even if it's impersonal, and around the 28% said they'd be understanding that a lot of companies get applications. That data ended up aligning with what we saw, that around 73% say that not hearing back is the number one negative candidate experience. So we didn't include that, but it sounds like they would definitely prefer just at the very minimum an impersonal, just kind of notification response. So I would say that the direct response from a real person or automated, a real person is always better. But I think the real question that it boils down to there is actually just hearing that kind of notification, just getting some kind of feedback about where they stand in the process, rather than, if you can achieve that, you're definitely doing a lot better and further ahead than before thinking about that real person. Just going to answer that. Okay. Moving on to the interview. So we asked, when interviewing for a role with a company, which of the following options contributes to a negative experience? And it's a similar kind of thing. So ghosting is once again that top indicator of a bad candidate experience. So not hearing back from a company if you're no longer advancing after an interview, especially because that's further on in the process. You've already talked with this candidate. They already know you. So for them to not hear back at all, definitely it's something that would contribute to that negative experience. And especially if you consider that kind of expectation around response time, like, you might be planning to get back to a candidate and maybe 10 days go by, but they might consider that ghosting, even if you are kind of on the process to actually get back to them. We also see that lack of information on what to expect from the interview process, slow response time on next steps is something that contributes to a poor experience. And then we do see that around 40% of candidates say unprofessional behavior from interviewer, which in our survey we defined as, being late, not coming prepared, things along those lines. And around 32% say that excessive rounds of interviews, seemingly without reason, is a negative experience. So definitely, helpful to have a really robust interview process, but it could be helpful to also make sure candidates understand what are the reasons for these rounds. Do they serve different purposes? Finally, as we're kind of looking at the entire hiring process, what would a candidate expect when it comes from submitting that application to receiving an offer? What do they feel is the most reasonable and ideal amount of time for a hiring process to take? As you can see here, nearly 80% of candidates think the entire hiring process should take less than 1 month. And so that is pretty quick when you think about the fact that it might take 2 weeks to get back to a candidate about their application. So this is something that we're seeing candidates are going into the fall season really with high expectations of employers that they want this process to move quickly. They wouldn't necessarily understand why it's taking slowly. And I think something to kind of keep in mind when it's, why do they have such high expectations? What is this, driving this really quick feedback loop? And when you think of how Gen Z candidates really interact with the rest of the world, every technology that they use is fairly instantaneous. So if they're going on Amazon, they're, placing an online shopping order, they're seeing where it's at every step of the way. So they submit, online form and they're getting that confirmation email. They're able to see where it's at in transit. They're able to, get in touch with someone to say, hey, like, what's my status with this? Like, where am I at? So when you think of that, the hiring process and being able to submit jobs in such an easy way on sites like LinkedIn or job boards, it's very easy and it kind of does resemble that online shopping experience. But the challenge comes is that this technology on the candidate side has become really evolved really quick to recommend these essentially jobs products to candidates. And so they're submitting this, but they're not quite understanding why is it on the back end that there's not just a sort of instant feedback loop where they're, knowing if they're being rejected, yes or no. And so the technology on that employer side hasn't necessarily caught up in a lot of these mainstream technologies. And that's something that we're actually working on a lot at RippleMatch. And I don't have this in the slide deck, but on our platform, our median response time to applications is actually 5 days or less to get back to candidates. And that's through our automation and our ability to really automate the applicant review process. But just something to keep in mind is that candidate expectations, they're expecting these online technology platforms to kind of act the same way as they're used to all of these other technologies, not necessarily thinking that on the other side of that job portal is a human recruiter that's going through all these applications and kind of making those choices of who to move forward. And just I'll take a look at these questions really quick, given that we have a number that came through. So let's see, how much lead time are they expecting with summer internships? How far ahead are they expecting to find and lock in that job? What we've seen from other surveys that we've done is that the highest volume months for candidates to really search for jobs does tend to be September and October. And then there's another wave really in January, February. So we've seen that candidates are searching definitely throughout the year, but it sounds like what they're expecting is not necessarily like, I'm going to find that job or internship within the first month of my job search in September, but they do expect that if they're, put into the process and they get their application reviewed, accepted, that they'll actually, if they're expecting it to get hired by a company, it will be a more reasonable, month instead of dragging out for 3 months. Let me just answer that one. And then this one is, it sounds like they expect quick responses and hate being ghosted, but they have no problem ghosting organizations with whom they RSVP'd. Is this accurate? I would say that is accurate. And that's the kind of interesting conundrum with the technology today and just how Gen Z is, moving throughout the job search. And I think it does come down to this kind of understanding of, a lot of the times they're applying through this technology, a role is recommended to them. It does feel a bit impersonal, and it does seem a little unfair that they're submitting all these applications or they're RSVPing for a lot of events, but they don't necessarily feel bad about not showing up because they're not interested. And I think it's because in a lot of ways the job search process has felt very transactional of sorts. You're putting your resume in a lot of places and you're expecting to get that feedback loop. But if you think about that transaction, if you're ordering something from a business and you never hear from them, even though it's a transaction, you're definitely going to still feel a bit of a way if you don't hear anything from that company. And so I think if you kind of think of how Gen Z behaves as consumers, it makes a lot of sense that this is kind of how they're interacting with the job search as well. So yeah, I would say that is accurate, as there's kind of this, double standard away, and not in a negative way. These candidates are just moving through the job search in the way that they're existing in the world. But definitely is something that we're seeing is this sort of balancing act of technology and then bringing that human element into the job search. Okay, so moving on, just a quick recap as we talked a lot about this, we're seeing that 63% of candidates expect a response after their application in 1 week, 55% of candidates lose interest in a role within 2 weeks, and 76% of candidates think the hiring process should take 4 weeks or less. So again, to recap this section, we're seeing a lot of expectations for that quick response time. And so if there's one way that you could really improve the candidate experience this fall is figure out how you can put those systems in place to get back to candidates pretty quickly to actually review candidates. And if you're interested in learning about how RippleMatch can help you with that, our technology does automate applicant review. So your inbound applicant review, if you're used to getting, 2,000 or 3,000 candidates in one rack, you're able to actually automatically sort through those and review, the top 5 to 10% of candidates that you can actually prioritize to get back to a lot sooner. But feel free to connect with me afterwards or our team to learn more about kind of addressing that problem. So to kind of close out our last section, and so definitely if you want to start submitting those Q&A, so we have time to answer those, that would be awesome because I think we'll definitely have time for a good amount of Q&A. So start thinking of all the questions that you want me to go through and submit those in the Q&A chat box. But for this last section, we're going to be talking about the state of reneges, which I know has been a recurring problem, a recurring theme over the last several years. So we've been asking this question about, how likely would you be to rescind your offer if a better one came along? So this question we ask candidates is, yes or no, how would you consider rescinding your offer if a better one came along? And we've been asking this question since spring 2022. And what we're seeing is it's remained pretty consistent. So this willingness to rescind an offer has just stayed fairly consistent, even as, the economy, as you might recall, in spring 2022 was doing really well. Candidates had a lot of different options. And, I had thought that the likeliness to renege on an offer would actually go down as the economy kind of got more shaky. Candidates would hold on to the job that they have. But really, that has not happened. We saw a slight dip in the spring, probably because those candidates that were still job searching, wouldn't rescind their offer in such a short amount of time. But it has gone back up again in fall 2023. And we're seeing that 76% of candidates that we surveyed said that they would consider rescinding their original offer if a better one did come along. In terms of what they consider a better offer, so we've also been asking this question pretty consistently. So we asked what would be the reasons you would rescind an offer for a different one. And looking back to spring 2023, we saw that salary has been a big motivator for candidates. Typically, salary tends to be the number one reason that candidates would rescind an offer if a better one came along. And that's remained pretty consistent over the past, year that we've asked this question. But in this survey, we did see there's been a slight shift, and we're going to continue to ask this question, every fall and spring to see how these trends evolve. But what we see here is there has been a bit of a shift in a better position aligning with that long-term career goals. And there has been some things in the news that have shown that a lot of starting salaries and, wage growth has not necessarily been the same kind of crazy growth that it's been the past several years with the economy. So I do think there could be a bit of a shift coming in candidates kind of accepting the fact that, they might not be able to get that high salary right out of school. They might not be able to negotiate with multiple offers, and, companies are just kind of pulling back those starting salaries. So I think we're seeing a bit more realistic expectations about salary, and instead have an expectation around long-term career growth and how does this actually play in with what they want to do in their career for the long term. So this is the highest number that we've seen so far with this question, which is 70% saying if that new position better aligned with their long-term career goals. So the other kind of interesting things here is we're seeing more of an increase on work-life balance and flexibility, as well as company culture at the new job, while job security has stayed about the same. So again, my takeaway from this has been that candidates now are considering a better offer, not just about the money. And I think that's because over the past year, we've seen so many layoffs. We've seen things that, if a company maybe offers you a high salary, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed to actually grow at that company and not be affected by things like layoffs. Can I just glance through these questions really quick? Yes. Okay. This question was about help to define better offers, about compensation, benefits, job responsibilities. So just going to mark that as answered. Cool. Let's keep going here. And yes, to answer the question, will the slides be made available to the participants? Yes, they will be. And I definitely encourage you to download the report as well. All of these slides are kind of adapted directly from the report, but we will be sending out the slide deck as well if you want to review these in slide format or share with your team. Definitely helpful to go through a set of slides and a pretty dense 30-page report with a lot of text in it. So we also asked the question, what are some things a company could do that would make you less likely to rescind an offer for another one? So again, we saw in the previous slides that the understanding long-term career goal and compensation are those top two factors. That said, we do see that compensation is still something that would really encourage candidates to not rescind an offer. This isn't always possible, but we do see that 57% candidates say if for compensation reasons offer to match that salary of the new offer. This is followed by walking them through the compensation package so they understand the full value, which is the same as walk me through opportunities for growth and career advancement at the company. And then stay in touch on a regular basis to beginning the position with the company. I do want to note that offering a signing bonus that they only receive when they start the job, it's actually not that helpful for reneges, which is pretty interesting and helpful to hear. Instead, they'd be looking for that more longer term salary bump or just understanding the full value of that compensation package. But the takeaway here that I would really try to understand is that conversations and that open line of communication are the things that would actually help prevent that reneged offer. So it's not so much about just saying here's a signing bonus or here's other people at the company to talk to. It's really kind of sitting down and walking through, this is your full compensation package. I understand that maybe another company is offering you a higher salary, but this is the value of your benefits, of the growth stipends that we offer, of PTO, and then walking through those opportunities for growth and career advancement at the company. So if that's something that you didn't have the chance to do during the interview really extensively, it's a great way to make sure that candidates actually understand, where could they grow at this company? And it, of course, can be hard to promise anything, and you don't want to, go down that road too much, but you can definitely walk them through, where there's internal mobility or they could move to try out different positions, and just kind of talking about the culture of growth at your company and just, what those philosophies are of advancing employees at the company. So this is really just helpful to understand that when you're going into the fall, how can you establish that trust and that open lines of communication with candidates? So when you're extending those offers, they don't feel like, if they accept it and then a better one, compensation, long-term career growth comes along, they're not making that decision in a vacuum, and that they could feel comfortable reaching back out and saying, I don't want to rescind this offer, but I would like to understand why I should keep this offer. And I do want to say, I think a lot of candidates these days don't necessarily quite grasp the fact that when you do accept a job offer, it's a legally binding contract. And so this is another just education gap that I think needs to continue to be addressed, that if you accept a job offer, you're not supposed to just continue to look for another job. You're supposed to, be happy with that and actually just, stick with that. But I do think candidates, given just like the shaky economy, the fact that they've seen job offers rescinded from employers, so employers that you're going through layoffs are taking away those job offers, I think candidates are just nervous to kind of accept that thing that they have, and they're not necessarily content with stopping looking. So it's just important to kind of make sure they feel really good about that offer. So to recap here, as we said, reneges, openness to reneges are pretty high. 70% of candidates would renege over, career fit if they found something that they thought was a better long-term fit for them. And then around 50% of candidates would be less likely to rescind their offer after discussing their compensation package. So just some final takeaways here, and I see some questions piling up in the Q&A. So again, now's your chance to just submit those questions, and I'll be looking through those very shortly. But just some key takeaways that we've really analyzed from this data, and that's just important to keep in mind going into this fall. So Gen Z has really ushered in this mass apply era. So the ease of technology and how easy it is to just, go down and submit these sort of impersonal applications, combined with the fact that, the economy has really made it just challenging, and Gen Z candidates are lacking in confidence, has led to this era of mass applying. And it also is coupled now with quick expectations, high expectations for quick responses. Also, candidates today are taking a hybrid approach to discovering career paths and searching for jobs. So as a hybrid generation, Gen Z is leveraging technology, traditional methods such as career fairs, their past jobs and internships, their academic interests with that new technology. So if you want to meet Gen Z candidates where they're at, you're going to need to leverage both. And then finally, Gen Z candidates today expect that really tight feedback loop during your hiring process. Whether or not that's a reasonable expectation, that is what they expect based on their expectations and experience with technology today. So candidates are expecting to hear back from you within, 7 days or less, and ghosting is the number one detractor from candidate experience. So something to keep in mind is really, if as you go into this fall and beyond, is how can you really explore technology that enables you to make your processes more efficient so you can focus on getting back to candidates and really prioritizing those candidates that are the best fit for your positions. So with that, I want to thank everyone just for taking the time to listen to all of that data. And again, we'll be sending the slides out, and we will be, this is available in that report. I definitely encourage you to download that and read through all of this data. But now I'm going to go through some of the Q&A that have been submitted here. And feel free to keep submitting these questions. So let's go through this. So this question, do you find Gen Z is expecting hybrid/remote work versus full-time, full on-site roles? So this is a question we didn't ask in this survey, but we asked this question in May 2023, so just a couple months ago. And that was asking the question of, when you're searching for jobs, are you expecting to get a hybrid role, or are you looking for jobs with the preference of hybrid, in person, or remote? And what we found with that answer, and this has stayed pretty consistent, is that Gen Z candidates today overwhelmingly do prefer hybrid. But we asked the distinguishing question of, do you prefer hybrid based on personal preference or company distinction? And more candidates actually prefer hybrid based on company distinction. And so, coming to the office 2 to 3 days a week defined by the company, versus hybrid of personal preference. And then it was followed by in-person was another preference with like around 10 or 15%. And then remote was actually the least popular this time around, with around 11% saying fully remote work. So I think to answer that question, Gen Z is expecting definitely more hybrid work, and they're hoping that they can actually do more of that hybrid work. And if, hybrid in person, especially defined by their employer, so they don't necessarily have to navigate do I come in today? Do I not come in today? So that's what we're seeing from that. Okay, in this era of mass apply, should students even be customizing their resumes and cover letters where applicable? So this is something that we actually just hosted a career advice panel for students yesterday. I hosted that for our student users we had a couple of our customers join that call, and they advised students that you really should be approaching your job search with customization and intentionality. And the problem with a lot of the mass supply technology today is it doesn't actually require students to necessarily think and customize about what they want to do. And so students, it kind of creates this vicious cycle where students are submitting all of these uncustomized applications, all of these applications for jobs they might not be a good fit for, they might not be super interested in, but because it's so easy, because these jobs show up when they search by filters or keywords, are just submitting that. And then employers are getting all these applications that aren't really, super customized. It's not clear why this student is a good fit for the role. And then students aren't hearing back as a result. So this is something that it's time consuming for students to actually customize that, but it kind of shows where there's this gap that technology can fill. And what we do at RippleMatch actually is, when students sign up for a profile, they're filling out all of these different things that isn't just a resume. They're filling out their involvement in campus clubs. They're filling out where they want to take their career. They're filling out their preferences for a job, their location preferences, when they want to start work. So we have all these data points that actually allow us to really intelligently match them with the opportunities that actually are a good curated fit with them. So we aren't putting the responsibility on the student to actually search roles in marketing in the East Coast. We are actually taking all of these hundreds of data points that we collected through that onboarding process, and just taking that and actually matching them with the hyper relevant opportunities. And so when they actually say, yes, I'm interested in the role, introduce me to the recruiter, 50% of those candidates actually end up getting an interview with that company because it's automatically customized, essentially. So I think, to answer that question, should students be customizing their resumes? I think they should be. I do think they should be taking a more curated approach to their job search and kind of thinking through what do I really want to apply for. But I also understand it's difficult and it's not necessarily realistic when a student sees how hard it is out there and they want to play this numbers game. And so that's why RippleMatch is trying to solve that problem through this automation technology. Looking at another question, does the report break down via industry/major, example, finance, business? This report, we did not break it down specifically, but our recent report that we published in May 2023, which was our early career index report, that actually did look at things like student job search volume, event trends, and I think one other thing I can't recall at the moment, by things like industry and major. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn afterwards, I can send that report over. That report we actually took from data collected through our platform. And so it's like hundreds of thousands of data points just from our platform behavior data, actually. So we were able to look at that by industry. So that one's a little bit more granular by industry, whereas this is more general Gen Z job search trends. But I'm happy to share that after the fact if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. How is RippleMatch working with schools? Multiple schools have different platforms. So that's a great question. And for all the career services folks on the call today, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn to just stay in touch, because RippleMatch, we don't work directly with schools, actually. So we work directly with employers. And so we have around over 200 employer partners, such as eBay is a great partner of ours. EY is another great partner. And you can see these on our website. Yesterday, we actually hosted a career advice panel with recruiters from Target, Verizon, McMaster-Carr. That was really great to give students advice around navigating applications, and you can see that on our LinkedIn as well. But we work directly with employers. And so what we do is connect with employers who want to leverage our technology to automate their processes and make their campus recruitment processes more efficient, and also connect with our network of students. And so we just work directly with them. And our relationship with schools is that, we would love for more students to, leverage RippleMatch. We would love for career services or schools that aren't, visited by a lot of companies to leverage RippleMatch by just encouraging their students to sign up to attend our career advice events, which we're hosting actually 3 more this fall around finding the right opportunity, navigating interviews, and the compensation conversation. So again, if you're a member of career services and want to connect more and just see some of our free open events for students, our platform's fully free for students. Our customers are the employers itself, but we definitely would love to form more relationships with schools, even though we don't work together in any formal capacity. All right, continuing down the question slide. Okay, this question, I find that more and more candidates not only want to learn more about the interview process, which is fine and understandable, now they're also asking specific questions. What specific questions will be asking in their interview, which feels like that would be giving them too much. Thoughts on this? I think that's a great question. And I think a good way to frame that is you want to make sure candidates are all in an even playing field, and you don't want to give, a candidate who has the confidence to ask, hey, what are the interview questions going to be? You don't want to give them an advantage over a candidate who's, that's not something that they feel comfortable doing. And so what we've seen a lot of our customers do is create interview prep packets. And so essentially what that is maybe it's a PDF, maybe it's a slide deck that gives more general interview best practices. And, if you want to get it more detailed by saying, we will be asking behavioral questions during this interview. And then a slide that's, what's a behavioral question? This is what it is. So you should make sure you come prepared with, several stories of how you work together with a team or how you really succeeded on a project. So I think the way to do that is I definitely don't recommend giving specific interview questions, because one, I think you could tell a candidate, well, the interview questions change over time. And also, we want to make sure every candidate is on the same playing field, but you can review our interview prep packet, which, gives as much information as you want and how detailed you want to go. So I think it's definitely great to have a interview prep packet. And I think that's really helpful for entry-level candidates, who may not have experience interviewing and who, of course, have different levels of just access to career services, different, people that they can talk to and practice interviews with. So I think it's a great chance to have an interview prep packet and use that to send to candidates. All right, let's see. How long, okay, there's a couple questions here on how long do candidates need to decide after getting a job offer? How long should you give them to make a decision? How quick are candidates making decisions? We don't have any hard data on this. This is not a question that we've surveyed, but anecdotally from our customers who I've talked with, we found that around 2 weeks to make that offer is pretty standard. However, what we've heard is really successful is not just, at the start of the, giving the offer, say, okay, we'll talk to you in 2 weeks, but to check in at different intervals to make sure that their questions are being answered. So you extend that offer, and then a couple of days later, you're saying, how is it going? Can I answer any questions? Or offer to set up a conversation to talk about, the compensation package or to walk through career advancement. So 2 weeks tends to be that standard that I'm hearing. I think 1 week is also reasonable. 2 weeks is a long time to wait. So I think depending on your schedule, 1 week is also very appropriate. I think like what you don't want is a candidate to have too short a time, like, maybe just a couple of days and they make a decision quickly, but then they're going to keep looking because they felt pressure to make it or, not take the offer. So I think the best practice there that we're hearing is between 1 to 2 weeks, but not having radio silence during that duration and actually checking in with candidates, talking with them about, what are the trepidations. And then one thing that I have heard is pretty effective is to kind of combat reneges is to actually explain to the candidate that you are really excited about them, whatever choice they make, but to actually just explicitly tell them that, by the way, when you make this choice, this is taking away a spot from another candidate. So it's actually, it's a very weighty decision, and actually just, being upfront and saying that if you're on the fence about this, like if you're considering just accepting it or reneging, like that is taking a spot away from another candidate. So we want to make sure that you feel fully confident, fully excited about this role. So that way, if you're accepting, we're not losing out on offering that to another candidate. And we've heard anecdotally that that's, led to just shorter response times. So candidates hear that and they're like, oh, you know what? I don't want to take that from another candidate. I'm just going to go ahead and actually reject this offer because it's not what I'm looking for long term. So that's something that I would kind of take into account when you're deciding about that window. A couple of questions there. And a couple more questions here. If you have any more questions, definitely submit them now since we're coming up on time, and I only have a couple questions left to answer, so definitely feel free to submit your questions. Is there any information about the benefits they're looking for in their search? We didn't ask that in this survey, but over the research I've conducted through the years, and especially recently, compensation continues to be just a really important thing for candidates. It's a theme that I've seen has stayed pretty consistent in this, pandemic, post-pandemic era. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the older members of Gen Z, so the ones who were entering the workforce in 2018, 2019, because I've been conducting our research since then, professional development, career growth, actually, and things like company culture actually was more important to candidates at the time than compensation. And I think that's because the economy was doing so well. There didn't seem to be a lot of economic instability. But once COVID hit, once candidates kind of saw those mass layoffs, and the candidates who were in their, freshman, sophomore, junior year were the ones who then entered the workforce in the past couple of years. Compensation and financial stability definitely is something that is top of mind for candidates. And so when it comes to benefits, I think in those conversations that you have with candidates is making sure it's clear how benefits that you offer actually can translate to financial stability or just workplace stability in general. And, a lot of benefits, you can't always put a dollar amount to them, but it definitely can be helpful that candidates understand, for example, that even if they have a higher dollar amount compensation package, if you have really robust benefits that kind of total up to, being really holistically financially secure, that's something that could definitely help candidates be really interested in your offer and sticking with that offer. And then final question is, how does the 100 applications per year compare to recent years? What we've seen is that when we asked this question a year ago, more candidates were saying between the 50 and 100 range. And this year, we've definitely seen that increase a bit more to more than 100 applications. And I think the last time I asked this question prior to that might have been closer to 2019, 2010, 20. Pre-pandemic Gen Z candidates definitely were not submitting as many applications. I remember that question that we asked was closer to even the 20 to 40 range. So I do think that this increase in applications seems to be a continually growing trend. So I don't have the exact stats on year over year how that compares, and we try to ask similar questions in these surveys, but definitely it's increased in recent years. Okay, so this question, if salary is the most important in the benefits package, what are their expectations on salary / compensation? So yes, this I also have a stat on in our early career index report. And again, that was published in May 2023. So it's very recent, fresh data. And that report, because again, we looked at our platform data, and what we had in that report is we analyzed the median average minimum. So we asked candidates, this is divided between non-STEM candidates and STEM candidates, and non-STEM candidates, the minimum salary that they expected going into their job search was 60,000, and the minimum salary that candidates who were going into a STEM field, their expected minimum was 70,000. And again, that was the minimum. And so it was a starting point. That was candidates who, when they signed up for our platform, they selected a data point of saying, this is my salary range. So the floor was at 60,000 for non-STEM candidates and 70,000 for STEM candidates. And again, happy to connect on LinkedIn to send over that report as well. Data is still very fresh, but this data is just from our most recent survey that we actually just wrapped up a couple weeks ago. So I think that gets us through all of the questions. If you have any final lingering questions, okay, this is a quick question. How does RippleMatch work to reach other students in business? So we just have candidates at universities all across the country through a combination of just field marketing, campus ambassadors. We also get a lot of applicants that apply through our partners that leverage our automated inbound applicant review technology. So we have an applicant base that comes from universities around the country, about 1,600 or more. Okay, so that I think salary dates separated by geographical location in the US. The salary data points that we included in our index report are not separated in the report by geographical location. That is data that we do have tucked away in our database somewhere that I'd have to do a bit of digging to find. But it was more segmented, I would say, by the job that they're going into. So a STEM field versus a non-STEM field. All right, final call for any questions. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and end this shortly. But I do want to say thank you so much to everybody who tuned in and asked such thoughtful questions. This was a great engaged webinar audience, and so happy I could share all of this data with you today. Appreciate you tuning in so close to the weekend as well, and we're happy to connect on LinkedIn and answer any further questions. But thank you so much, everyone, and we'll go ahead and end this webinar. But have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you so much.